All right, so what are we talking about next? We're talking about how do you get a website actually online? So this might seem like a secondary problem after all the stuff we've been looking at, splitting up files and JavaScript and HTML and all the code and everything, but how do you actually get this like onto a website so other people can see it? Like, what is a website at the end of the day? This is something that a lot of time we neglect when we're learning to code. We figure if I just get the files worked out, the rest will kind of take care of itself. But actually, this thing we call web hosting is kind of complicated and really trips up a lot of people. In fact, when I was starting out, this was mainly what I was doing for people, sorting out problems with their hosting, sorting out problems to get them set up and their websites actually working on the internet. This is the part that a lot of people have trouble doing. So we looked at making our own files. We had an index HTML, we had a style CSS, we had a JavaScript file, and they were up on Code Sandbox, okay? One thing we're gonna do in the next section, not the next video, but in the next section, is figure out how to have those working on your computer. So you're actually gonna have those files like on your computer and they're gonna run. Now, they're going to be in like a folder on your computer, right? They might be like in a work folder or a downloads folder or a documents folder or something like that, but that's not accessible from the internet. So if you make all your nice pages, you're going to have to move those, copy them from there onto the internet somewhere. So how a website really works, I've used this analogy a bunch in the past, which is basically you have this thing called the domain name, and a domain name is our www.whatever.com, or there's a lot of other things other than .com nowadays, .net, .io, you name it, there's a whole bunch of them. And that's kind of like a room number. That's like when you go to the hotel and they give you a room number, that tells you where to go to get to your room. It's not actually the room itself, it's just like a label that helps you find the room. Then when we're actually going into the room, we're going to the actual website, there needs to be actual space where there's things like the bed and the desk and the chair and the TV. That's your hosting. Your hosting is the space where your website files are all organized. So when you go to a website, you go tell the browser, here's the number, here's the room number or whatever of the website, which is the domain name, and then it goes to that room number, opens it up, and shows you the files that have been put into that hosting. So that's a little analogy to help you understand. So you have to rent that space. You have to get that space somewhere and put it up so that the rest of the internet can access it. And there's a lot of ways that this is done, like I said. Right now, what I have open on the page is something called cPanel, which is one type of hosting that's fairly good for beginners. It's a good, straightforward way to do it. But there's things like AWS. There's more advanced things that are done through things like GitHub or services called Heroku, or really there's like actually dozens and dozens of ways to get your files onto the internet. And a lot of it depends what you're doing. Now, we're working with some pretty basic files, just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're not doing databases. We're not doing any of that complicated stuff just yet. That's for some other course where we're a bit more advanced. So we just need a way to get like HTML files, CSS, and JavaScript files up on the internet. So our first step is to pick our domain name. So to get a domain name, you can Google a little guide on how to pick the best domain name. I'm not going to really explain that part to you, but I would recommend that you use Namecheap to get domain names. A really popular service out there is GoDaddy. I generally haven't really loved GoDaddy over the years. I find they're trying to constantly upsell you things, and the interface is kind of, I never really enjoyed it very much. I do like Namecheap, and I find them to be pretty cheap and easy to use, and it's a nice interface, and they're not constantly upselling me crazy stuff I don't need. So Namecheap, I would recommend you type it in, you grab the domain. They're usually something between $3 a year and $20 a year, and then you just renew that on an ongoing basis. Now, hosting is a little bit trickier. So most of these services, whether it's GoDaddy or Namecheap or whatever, offer hosting. They have all this different type of hosting: shared, WordPress, reseller, VPS, dedicated servers. Generally, no matter what you're going with, at the beginning, shared hosting is going to do fine for you. There's also services like HostGator. Like if you bought your domain name somewhere else, you can use HostGator and you can connect the two. You can connect this domain to the storage that's holding your files. You can connect them this way. There's also, I use Green Geeks. I've used that for years. It's okay. It's not like something amazing, but it's all right. I've used it for years. And like I said, most of these services, HostGator or whatever, they also have domain registration tied in. So they're all kind of like working on a package deal. So if you just want to pick one, you roll with it. Shared hosting will generally cover what you need. You can start off with the lowest one. Trust me, these guys never mind if you're going to upgrade over time. You're not going to be stuck if you pick the lowest one and now you can't upgrade it or something. It's not going to be a big issue. You can see here they include an actual domain name. Now, they're all kind of like, none of them are .com ones, but then they say 3 websites. There's some storage and a bunch of mail. You don't really have to worry about anything other than that you're actually getting hosting. You're not going to need a lot of this other stuff. 20 gigs, you don't need 20 gigs for what we're looking at doing in this course. Generally, at the start, you shouldn't really pay much more than something like this, or $5 a month. That's going to be fine. Now, hooking everything together is complicated. I'm going to give you just some of the terminology that you can look up if you end up having to do this yourself. There's going to be lots of videos about it. You're going to have these things called name servers that are basically on the domain, and you have to point these name servers to the right hosting. So if you get certain hosting, they'll give you 2 different name servers, and you have to go back over to where you bought your domain, and there'll be a little place where you can enter in special custom DNS information. DNS information is just the term that is used. And in there'll be a place you can put your own custom name servers. And so you'll put one, and then you'll put the other, and then you have to wait like a little while, and eventually they'll start hooking up. Okay, so again, look that up more if you really need to, or leave me a comment, and I don't mind doing a quick tutorial on an example of showing it. I just don't want to get too bogged down. Now, once you have a site hosted, a lot of them will use something like this cPanel. This is generally what's still used a lot out there for those shared hosting services. And in a thing like this, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and it can be confusing where to even go. There's stuff about databases, there's domain security stuff. There's places you can install WordPress in one click, which is really handy, but not really what we're doing. So where you're going to go in a system like this, you're going to look for the file manager. And you're going to go into the file manager, and this is basically the folder of your site. And there's all this information. It's really crazy, but you're going to look for a folder called public HTML. That's the basic root of your website. Now you can see here when I went into public HTML, there's an index HTML file. So the index HTML, the reason we call it that is that's like the default thing that the browser looks for. If I called it frontpage.html, the browser wouldn't know that that's what the front page should actually be. Index.html is just the default, so we call it index.html. Then you can see I have a bunch of folders here. I have JS folders, CSS folder. I also have a bunch of other folders that are related to other little projects I've done. But this is now replicating the other folder that I have like on my computer, which has these files in it. So anytime that I make those changes to my own version and say, okay, I'm ready to upload a new version, I would come here, I would maybe select this and delete the current one, and then press upload and upload a new one, right? You can upload a file here. And that's roughly how you're going to get your stuff up onto websites. Now, there's a lot of other ways to do this. We're going to be going over in a little bit how to connect this up with something called SFTP rather than having to go directly to a file manager every time. I would recommend, for the sake of this course, if you're looking to make your own website or get this working, it's probably worth buying a domain and a little bit of hosting so that you can work on this together as we're doing it. We can go over the things like SFTP together. But if that's not really important and you just want to make something local, then this is just kind of good stuff to know in your general web development career. But you're going to be doing stuff totally different than this later on. One other small topic on this is something called SSL. This is when you have this little lock on a site, the little HTTPS that happens. This is a special, basically, setting that can be turned on. You often have to pay a little more to have it turned on, but that used to be really complicated to do. But nowadays, most of these services, whether that's Namecheap or Green Geeks or whatever, you can just message support and tell them that you want an SSL certificate enabled on your site. A lot of them will just do it for free nowadays. So do that if you need it. You don't have to worry getting them all hooked up. can be a real nightmare for someone who's new. I literally made money on it in the past because it's so complicated for people to do, but nowadays it's been simplified a lot. So hopefully this gives you some idea of how you actually get a site online. And feel free, like I said, to buy a domain, try it out, try getting the little bit of information we had online. But we're going to be going through this in a couple different ways in the future lessons. So we're going to come back to this later on. So we'll see you in the next one.